owners pay respects to elders past and present of the land on which the meeting is being held. During the meeting, panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering information before them. And the meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Item 2 on part A of the agenda is apologies. Councillor Linton Rumble from Shire of Ashburton and Councillor Matthew Lynch from the Shire of Ashburton. Item 3 on the agenda, members on leave of absence, there are none. And item 4, noting of minutes of previous meetings available on the website. And part B of the agenda, we have an application for the Shire of Ashburton. And item 1, I'll ask the panel members that they have duly considered all of the documentation contained within part B of the agenda. If you raise your hand to confirm. Thank you very much. Item 2, disclosures of interests. I'm not sure whether the panel you participated in.
Yes, I have participated in the Shire Ashburton's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I myself would like to declare that I have participated in the same meeting.
Okay.
With partiality interest, and that will not affect or bias my decision today.
Okay, thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, Form 1 DAP applications, there are none. Item 4, a Form 2 DAP application at item 4.1 for lot 300 Back Beach Road, Onslow, transient workforce accommodation is the application. Now, we don't have any presenters, so unless there are any questions of council staff in this regard by the panel members, are there any?
I do. I mean, we have had a look at council meeting, and we know there are some minor changes, and one of the concerns that I have is that the childcare centre has now, the creche has been changed to the childcare centre, as a childcare centre, and we understand it's only for the transient mineral resource and some transient workforce accommodation, and that is not site will not be used for to offer to local community members. The centre will not, the services will not be offered to local, as this is we're concerned that this will affect the actual centre, that there is one in Onslow.
Okay.
We don't want the conflict, and if there is anything like that, may probably say we'll request for it to come to council to have that again.
Okay.
It's council staff.
Yes, Andrew, is it?
Jack.
Oh, Jack, sorry. Jack, the councillor's concerns, I think, has been encapsulated in a condition anyway, hasn't it?
As an advice note, yeah.
Okay, so that's that. Any further questions of the staff? If not, we can move into the item as a panel. So in order to do that, can I have a mover and seconder for the item, please? Seconder. Okay, who's to speak to the item? As the mover. Speak to the motion if you wish.
I think I've already asked that question, and I'm happy I've noted the questions.
Okay, seconder, wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting application, great for the town of Onslow. Very rigorous planning has gone into it, and hopefully they'll meet all the conditions that have been laid out in the document. Yeah.
Okay. Any other panel members to speak to that? Yes, Lindsay.
I'll just say that really there's not that much to say about the application other than agreement that it complies with regulation 17(1)(c) of the DAP regulations, does not change the intent of the original approval, and is acceptable on that basis.
Okay. John?
I very briefly, look, these are fairly minor amendments to an plan, concern regarding the operation of the childcare centre. I think clearly this is delineated in that advice note that this is only for the site itself and not services outside. And if that changed, then they need to go through a process. So I think that's been clearly established. So I think apart from that, these are pretty straightforward minor changes, I think.
Okay, thank you. And I'll mirror those comments. This is in conformity, consistent with the overall planning for the site and approvals for the site. So I'll be supporting them. That being the case, Councillor, do you wish to close debate on the item?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'll put the item then. All those in favour of the recommendation? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. C of the agenda, City of Bunbury. We have an application there, and we have the councillors from Bunbury on it.
We're not going to admit them.
Good morning, City of Bunbury. Can I have the names of everybody in the room, please? So,
So Matilda Hodge, Senior Planning Officer.
okay, thank you, Matilda.
Brandon Goodwin, Development Engineer.
Thank you.
Annalise Miller, Acting Team Leader.
Right. Finally,
And Alice Baldock, Acting Manager of Planning and Building.
okay, thank you. And good morning, Councillor Andrew and Councillor Brown. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, you've got those all recorded. Okay, item 1 on the agenda is declaration of due consideration. All panel members indicate that they've duly considered all the information on part C of the agenda. Councillors, if you could indicate, thank you. Item 2, disclosures of interest. I invite panel members to disclose any interest in the item.
None here, Mr. Chair. None here, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Considered at council. Was the item considered at council?
No.
Wasn't considered at council.
Fine, thank you. All right, item 3 on the agenda then is the Form 1 development application for lot 60, Winning Drive, Glen Iris, proposed warehouse storage facility. There are no presentations, but the team's available if anyone wishes to answer or have any questions answered by the applicant team. If not, then we can move on to council staff. Do any panel members have questions of council staff regarding the application? If not, then we can move on to the item. Item 3.1. As a panel, we can go into discussion on it, but before that, I'll need a mover and a seconder for the item. Mover, Councillor Andrew. Seconder, Councillor Todd. Councillor Andrew, you wish to speak to the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, I think, we're talking about a shed, which is pretty straightforward. I do notice there is obviously some variances that are documented, but they're only minor, and it does seem to apply with the amenity of the area. I think it's worth acknowledging the ongoing investment by the organisation. It's been a long time part of the Greater Bunbury area. But no, I just think that we should move on and approve this and for panel members to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Todd, you wish to speak to the motion?
Just to say that it's a welcome investment to the city of Bunbury, and look forward to the development being established and completed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other panel members wish to speak to the item? Lindsay?
Really, just for the record, thank you, presiding member. As the mover has indicated, this application is essentially for a very big shed. Notwithstanding apparent non-compliance with some of the local planning scheme provisions, such as parking, landscaping, and design, it is acknowledged that the proposed building sits on a large area of land which has existing development, and this building is in addition to and complementary to the site. A height discrepancy is minimal, and for the reasons advanced in the responsible authority report, I'm of the view that discretion on the scheme provisions can be applied. It is also noted that almost all the provisions of the Wimbridge structure plan do not apply. Accordingly, I'm of a view that support for the development is warranted. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Simon, you wish to speak?
Oh, look, briefly, yes, I agree with all of that. But it is pretty much within the planning framework, except with some very minor discrepancies. It's clearly an interesting piece of infrastructure. It's a positive thing for Bunbury, quite clearly, because it shows the economy is growing quite nicely, which I think from other work is certainly true. And as far as that's concerned, it's a fairly straightforward piece of industrial infrastructure, which I think we can approve fairly easily.
Thank you, and I'll mirror those thoughts as well. I won't reiterate them further. Okay, Councillor Andrew, do you wish to close debate on the item?
It's all been said. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right. Well, that being the case, I'll put the item as recommended. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors, council staff, and we'll move on to the next item. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was down in Albany 2 weeks ago. Spent quite a bit of time in that little area, your street and that, because it's just around the corner.
Still.
Yeah, I think there was a race, yeah.
Just want to ask the councillors, I think.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to check to see do you have the presenters or the team? Do you know who's there?
Yep, so Advanced Housing's online. In the room with Greg Stocks, is that Mayor Stocks and Deputy Mayor Terry? Great.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, well, part D of the agenda this morning is the City of Albany. There's an application on Spencer Street, Stirling Terrace, and Frederick Street. First item I'll ask, confirm all panel members have duly considered all the documentation contained within part D of the agenda and part D related information. If you'll indicate. Thank you, councillors. There was an R13 direction response published on the 30th of July. Item 2, disclosures of interest. Panel members, do you have any interest to disclose on this?
No, Chair.
No declarations.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, item 3 is the application 3.1. Mixed-use development, 18 group dwellings and additions and alterations to the existing heritage listed commercial buildings. There are no presentations. However, do any panel members have questions of the team that applicant team. Yes, councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask Advanced Housing if they could respond to the conditioned section of the windows on Spencer Street, and their response to that requiring some sort of change and not having the support in the outcome.
Is that condition 13?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Can I have a name as going to respond, please?
Mr. Chair, my name's John Lysart. I'm the Chief Executive Officer. On this particular issue, I would like to defer to our architect, Julie de Jong from H&H.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Thanks for raising the issue, Mayor Stocks. It's one that the Planning Department have raised with us. We are concerned about the impacts on the feasibility of a commercial premises that does not have access to natural light or passive surveillance of the street. We felt that that would be an important feature for the long-term viability of the commercial premises, but we are prepared to discuss that with planning staff to come to what we hope will be a reasonable solution. Just obviously with consideration that modern and contemporary standards for office premises would have a strong focus on natural daylighting instead of artificial lighting and passive surveillance of the main street front.
Does that answer your question, councillor, or supplementary?
I have a supplementary, Chair, if you don't mind. Can you, thanks, Julie. I'm just wondering whether some of those other means of getting some natural lighting might include potentially skylighting, given it's a second story. And if I'm reading your response correctly, you think you can live with that condition and try and find a reasonable outcome?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Stocks. We have considered whether or not we can do skylighting. It's not ideal in a commercial premises, particularly here where we may need to put roof plant, etc. on the roof, and we've got a sort of a mixed use scenario, but we will definitely consider that option. And then I guess the key aspect is obviously having that the ability to have eyes on the street for Spencer Street and Frederick Street. So on the Frederick Street side, we accept that the city want us to reduce the total area of apertures. So at the moment, we're proposing a 1.5 square metre increase in the amount of apertures, and they've asked us to change the format of that fenestration, which we can do, subject to achieving a suitable sill height and in aligning with brick coursing of the old building. But I think on the Spencer Street side, we're really obviously aiming to get some additional lighting and views on the street there. But we feel confident that we can discuss and negotiate a suitable outcome with the planning staff.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, councillor.
Councillor Terry. Just a question in relation to the waste management, excuse me, in relation to the waste management plan, especially along Frederick Street. I know in the plan it shows that the bins would be placed basically along the footpath, but there's got to be car parking spots there. But I note that there is some indication to remove one of those car parking spots. Not sure if I need to ask this question to either the proponents or our staff members. I'm not sure. I think that
let's try both to start with.
Yeah. So is removing one of those car parking bays going to be enough, or would there be two, especially if there's going to be FOGO and general waste bins for 10? I think it's 10 units along Frederick Street. I'm just concerned that one bay may not be enough.
Advanced Housing, someone respond, please.
Thank you. So the city staff haven't raised that issue with us. Obviously, we were attempting to maximise the number of street bays available for parking based on previous community commentary relating to that. So we would accept a reduction in car bays if the City of Albany believed that that's consistent with what community expectations are. But the reason that we maximised the number of car bays in the verge was to respond to previous requests to provide more car parking.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Terry.
So just in relation to the verge, that I'm guessing is effectively city land, where the parking will be. So with that, I can't remember reading, would the proponents be the ones responsible for maintaining that, or the city?
Correct. So we would be submitting a verge development application to allow us to introduce landscaping and street parking there. The bays themselves obviously can't actually be designated directly to the tenants because they're in the public verge, and they're intended to offset the demands for community parking relating to adjoining commercial premises and residents. So the advanced housing would be taking on the ongoing maintenance of the verge landscaping development, but the city would manage the verge parking and any signage that goes there relating to parking limits or use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Mr. Syme?
Yeah, can I just follow up to you, Mr. De Jong, just on that Spencer Street elevation? We haven't got the council officers here, I don't think. What happened? I suppose the question is, what happens if you can't resolve it? Do you come back here with a Form 2, or how confident are you that can be resolved? Because it is either a matter of heritage ideology, or it's a matter of practical application, and there's some middle ground in there, obviously. So the question is, how confident are you this can be resolved easily?
That's a great question. I guess I'm relying on common sense to prevail here. We can look at different formats of fenestrations. We can certainly look at skylighting where this is achievable. But obviously skylighting does not allow views of the street. And we consider that passive surveillance of the street is a critical part of success for a commercial premises. I guess to date, the city staff have been challenging to deal with regard to this building. But we feel that we've come a long way in helping them to understand that ultimately this proposal is trying to give this building another 50 years of usable life. At the moment, it is in a very poor condition. The buildings have not had good occupancy, and that's because of all the shortfalls that we're trying to address in terms of accessibility, daylighting, amenity, all of those things. So ultimately, we're confident that the city staff will find a suitable compromise and won't be as precious about the elevation to help us achieve those aims.
Yeah, good luck. Yep. I presume the window layout is for daylight as well as highlighting or showcasing what's behind it or what's in the building, as a window to a shop or something like that.
Correct. Yep. So the windows that are in contention are the ones on the proposed new upper floor. So what we've got at the moment is a single-storey building that has a very large roof space that has a loft in it. The loft has traditionally just been used for storage and is an ad hoc structure. Without changing the facade, the wall heights or anything, we're able to actually fit 2 stories in there. But obviously what that challenge is that the upper story would not have windows in it without us introducing new windows. And ideally, we're trying to put windows on the Frederick Street, which is the north elevation, and Spencer Street, which is the west elevation, both of which are street frontages, as well as additional windows and apertures on the other 2 elevations so that they've got views across. So it is really important from our perspective, from a good design perspective, that there are windows for natural lighting, for ventilation, and for passive surveillance of the street.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions of the presenters? John?
Yeah, if I can follow up on that, in your view, does your is your proposal as it currently stands in the plans consistent with the heritage values which are applied to this site?
So that's a good question. I guess the challenge that we've got is that the building does not have identified very strong aesthetic values. So it is identified that it is a late example of a particular architectural style. It's not a very good example of that architectural style. I'm a heritage architect as well as an architect. I feel that the challenge here is that the building was built to an economy and for a different function. So it was a hardware warehouse built in the late 1940s. Obviously, for a hardware warehouse, you don't need the extent of windows, you don't need the street front address as we would look at now for a commercial premises. So I guess I feel that the proposal to add new apertures and fenestrations into the window, into the building facades, which we've tried to design reflective of the design rules that, you know, applied to the interwar Art Deco and functionalist style, which were often either horizontal or vertical proportion, grouped symmetrically, which is what we've tried to do here. Will be sympathetic to the original style. And ultimately, we're not trying to do a restoration project here. We're actually trying to do adaptive reuse. And this building has been modified for many, many decades to suit a variety of uses. And I guess this is the last change that we're kind of proposing, which addresses all those lack of amenities and why it's had such a limited opportunity for adaptive reuse in the past.
Would you prefer that condition 13 wasn't there?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me, presiding member. We
Councillor.
have staff here, so in the room.
Yes, we can see that. Yes. I was going to say if there's no more questions of the presenters, then I would open up questions of the council staff by panel members.
Up to next.
Okay. Lindsay?
Yeah. Thank you, Lindsay Baxter. So a question to the council staff in relation to condition 12. The very last dot point says any matters are likely to impact upon the surrounding properties or the road reserve. Now, although Norman House doesn't form part of this application, it is a surrounding property. Could that dot point pick up a dilapidation report for Norman House, or is it intended that it do that?
Yes, yeah. Oh, that was supposed to say
the second to last dot point is intended to address that.
Okay. And is it likely that a dilapidation report could be required for that surrounding property?
I don't think there's a need of nexus necessarily for that to be included in the condition. I think based on the advice, the referral comments from State Heritage in relation to the Sterling Heritage precinct places, that was the extent of where we thought that the construction management plan would identify how it was going to manage those impacts. I don't believe that there would be sufficient requirement to require a dilapidation report as part of that condition.
Okay, thank you. One more condition.
Yes.
Sorry, question if I can. The panel received some a late email from a resident in Frederick Street objecting to the height of one of the buildings. That was the No, it was Jackie Davidson.
Oh, okay, yes, and Jackie Davis.
Yeah, now the view corridor, in the previous report, it indicates that the view corridor is to be established from Frederick Street towards the Penny Post building. Is that simply a view corridor just to sort of keep space, if you like, or was it to protect residents' views?
It was initially implemented to protect space on the Frederick Street frontage.
Okay, so sort of as a pedestrian perhaps walking along Frederick Street, rather than views of a neighbour or somebody on the other side of Frederick Street.
Yes, yeah, for the general public.
Okay, thank you. That's
Okay, just getting back to the dilapidation report, I presume that Advanced Housing in its usual way would undertake dilapidation reports of adjoining properties as part of its good neighbour and insurance requirements. Would that be correct? Most builders do undertake dilapidation report if they're going to start doing site works and compaction and so forth.
Yep. Mr. Chair, we certainly will be.
Okay, thank you. Yes, John, you had a...
Look, I'd like some comment on the council staff on the condition 13 and what their expectations as to how this might play out.
For us, probably look at it in two parts, where there's the Frederick Street elevation with the existing windows, and that's probably where we have a bit more flexibility in what we can work with, noting that the windows will need to be moved to accommodate the second floor. But yeah, as Julie has mentioned, we would like to try and reduce the overall area in some way, but we're open to working through that with Advanced Housing. The Spencer Street side, as we mentioned in the report, given the other works that are also going on, we believe the windows as proposed now are a bit too much in terms of alterations to the fabric. And yeah, we'll work through with Advanced Housing as to what.
So on what basis do you say they're too much? You say you believe they say they're too much. On what's the basis of that belief?
Essentially, so informed by the city's heritage advisors' input on the recent revised proposal, the fact that the facade itself is the main element of the building that is being retained, and notwithstanding the architect's comments in that it doesn't present much aesthetic value, it is identified in the place record form as a rare example of the interwar functionalist style. So the amount or extent of modifications proposed to the facade is quite substantial, and given the fact that the rest of the building is being substantially modified and or removed to enable this development. So the city's position is that really, as you know, as with basic borough charter principles, is as little as possible to achieve a positive heritage outcome. So we understand the surveillance of the street and recognise that, but the modifications that are being implemented to the ground floor would sufficiently satisfy that, and other alternatives to access light to that Spencer Street facade.
So how do you propose to balance those worthwhile heritage objectives with the other basic urban design objectives of asset surveillance and the functionality of the building? How do you propose to balance that? Practical.
Thank you. I think the response is that that's already sufficiently addressed on the ground floor. We've also considered and accepted the proposed veranda, although if we were to go with very strict heritage principles, there was no original veranda proposed, whereas that's we have accepted that the veranda in the simple style that is proposed was acceptable in this instance from an urban streetscape, urban design perspective, to allow shelter for the office workers and visitors, and then also to manage signage outcomes as well from a planning perspective. So then to minimise any additional changes to the facade itself with signage. So therefore it was considered that those urban design principles are addressed already through the other works that are happening.
So is your position then that there should be no change to that elevation essentially?
To the upper floor, like where the new upper floor is proposed. The other modifications on the ground floor in relation to, there's a new, where the window is, there's a new door going in. There's what's the
change to the veranda.
The new veranda, well, the removal of the current veranda and installation of the new veranda. And the modifications to the windows. And to the lobby as well, to allow for that. So additional glazing, that sort of thing. So there was sufficient, it was considered that based on the amount of modifications to the overall facade on the ground floor to Frederick Street, that enough was happening. And with based on the LDP and those revisions was that the facade to be retained and minimal modifications to be done.
So if I'm just looking at their elevation, west elevation, Spencer Street, they want to put in new shop front doors and windows, new shop front glazing, new recessed entry, and new wall openings for first floor window frames. You're not in favour of any of those?
No, we're very in favour of the ground floor elements. It's the upper floor elements of the Spencer Street facade, that those new additional windows.
Okay, so it's the upper floor. There's six vertical windows in there, and you're not in favour of any of those. But your ground floor you're okay with. But
on balance, that's where we're satisfied that that's where we would support the extent of modifications proposed for the Spencer Street element.
So you're really only arguing about those six upper floor opening. Yes,
but because of the simple, based on the functionalist, it's simple with, yes, there are Art Deco elements with those the features and that sort of thing, but we didn't believe that the change to the upper level for those windows was warranted.
And what space is that though? What space is that opening into? And maybe the advanced housing might be able to help us here.
It's an office.
Is that an office up there?
Yes.
Yes.
So that office would add no external light then.
So
we'll have reduced light. So obviously we're trying to add light on the 2 street elevations there. So if we were unable to have windows as the city have proposed on the Spencer Street elevation, then we would have no windows on the upper floor tenancy overlooking Spencer Street, which is obviously the primary commercial street.
Because it is you're introducing a use in the upper floors, are those windows that you've shown, are they in keeping with the sort of architectural style of the post-war buildings?
That is our contention. So obviously with the functionalist or the Art Deco style, they usually consisted of either horizontal strip bands or vertical windows that were grouped together symmetrically. So we felt that the proportion of these windows, we're talking about essentially 4 square metres of opening in a wall that they aggregate of total openings. So we felt that that was our best architectural response that was consistent with the old style. And the other things we've done is obviously we've retained the original roof line or facade line. We're retaining those glass bricks and the new verandas that we're replacing. So there are existing verandas there. Just to note, we're not adding verandas where there have been none. There have been verandas there since the 90s, and they are a bullnose veranda, which is obviously an inconsistent architectural style with the Art Deco or functionalist. So we're proposing a new modern, functionalist style veranda that's lightweight, that also provides a surface where new signage can be added, limiting more impacts on the facade.
So those west elevation upper windows, they match and are the same rhythm and format as the ones facing Frederick Street, aren't they?
Yes. So in terms of what we've proposed is matching windows of the same style, proportion and rhythm across the two facades. Obviously, the city planning staff have indicated that we can't proceed with the sets of 3 vertical windows on the Spencer Street. So we'll be having to retain the existing window proportions, which are much more domestic style, not really consistent with the Art Deco style either, or functional style either. But they would probably be quite, unsympathetic on the Spencer Street facade, which we consider the primary corner.
Were they original, those ones you just talked about, the domestic looking one?
Not necessarily. So they're a timber frame window with a wire frame glass in them. So they could be from... They weren't
original.
Probably not, no. So, but we accept that they might be original openings, but the window frames are unlikely to be. We have to replace those window frames anyway because they don't comply with current glazing standards.
Okay, and council staff, did you get Heritage Architect advice on your position?
Yes, we referred it to our Heritage advisor.
Okay, thank you.
And also there was the report proposed as part of the original proposal, but we didn't refer it back to them. The city's Heritage advisor is just to clarify, isn't a heritage architect per se, but she's very familiar with the and has worked in the city of Albany heritage area for many years, so is very familiar with the site.
She's not a heritage architect though.
No, that's to clarify that, but that's where we also we obtained the advice from Urbis, who the heritage advice from them was a heritage architect.
Thank you. Councillor, Mayor Stocks, you had it.
Yep, thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to advanced housing for some clarification. If condition 13 remains, you're talking about common sense prevailing and being able to come up with a suitable alternative. I'm not clear on what you think that alternative might be.
I'm not clear either, Councillor Stocks. So we've had multiple meetings with the planning department requesting sort of, I guess, concise feedback on what the issue is relating to new apertures. So we asked, was it the proportion of the windows? Was it the size of the windows? Was it the square meterage of the windows? Was it the placement of the windows? Was it the design of the windows? So to date, we've not been able to get any clear advice back from them or their heritage advisor as to what the actual design solution is. We've offered multiple sort of scenarios because we're trying to obviously respond to some performance criteria. If the advice is that we need to reduce the amount of aperture to a certain percentage of the wall, then that would be really helpful. If it was to do with what is the design of the fenestration, that would be really helpful. But to date, we've been unable to get clear advice. So we've done what we felt was a good approach and a reasonable approach. We don't feel like we're trying to put a whole glazed wall in there and we're dealing with a challenging building. So we feel like what we've put forward is a reasonable response to the functional and aesthetic requirements. And in consideration that this building has been modified over the decades since it's been built, and is not necessarily an excellent architectural example of this style.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions of either the proponents or council staff? If not, thank you very much for your answers to the queries of the panel. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. It's so that we can discuss as a panel the item. May I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation as published? Stokes. And seconder Lindsay Baxter. Yes, Mayor, if you'd like to speak to the item, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Many thanks to Advanced Housing for their revised proposal. It's remarkably different, and they've taken on the feedback from the original proposal and the feedback from the previous RDAP meeting. So it meets our aspirations around city infill and social and affordable housing. I think it's a great project, and the removal of Norman House demolition satisfies most of the concerns we had with the community. I think the parking relaxations in the RAR are well explained, and the removal of the crossovers on Frederick Street and that change to public parking at the front and the landscaping that goes with that is a marked improvement. So I'd just like to say to AHL, thank you for the revised plan. The city supports this development very strongly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lindsay, as seconder, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, also thank you to the applicants and their consultants for agreeing to the deferral of this application when it came before the Development Assessment Panel earlier this year. The city also for its current assessment, and the Albany Historical Society for the late information that was provided. There were obvious concerns about the heritage monuments on the sites at that time, in particular in relation to Norman House, but the exclusion of that building and in the revised application solves that problem for the time being. The application before the panel today is for the general retention and modification of 2 other existing buildings and their adaptive reuse, and the development of 18 group dwellings on what is quite a challenging site over different levels. There are some significant areas of discretion to be applied to the overall development, including car parking setbacks, view corridors, and open space. These matters are noted, and I'm comfortable with that, having regard to the purpose of the application and in particular, the provision of specific purpose inner city housing and the assessment of those matters in the RAR. These are not fatal to what is actually now a very good development. The application is therefore generally compliant with the strategic and statutory objectives for the precinct. The additional density is warranted, and it represents a significant investment in housing in inner city Albany. I do find the residential dwellings a little understated from the drawings submitted, but there are at least some elevations in the documentation prepared by the applicant which depict them in perhaps a more photographic form. So they appear to be acceptable and fit for purpose. Having regard to those considerations, I'm prepared to support the application, subject to the conditions recommended in the Responsible Authority report. I do move that the words of the R13 be included in condition 5. Thank you.
Okay, so is that a procedural amending motion?
I guess so, yes.
Okay, so the seconder has moved that the words yes, okay, so plan number is to the words to be drawing L10 revision A and B and drawing L11. So that's in condition 5 as an amending motion. Move that. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Syme, any further any dissent on the motion? Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? If not, I'll put the amending motion. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Okay, yes, does anyone else wish to speak to the item? Councillor Terry?
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. Once again, I'd just like to thank Advanced Housing for the development application. It will be a major repurposing of the lot, and as the Mayor explained, badly needed in a CBD area. The issues that have been discussed in relation to the waste, I look forward to seeing an update, especially for those places along Frederick Street. I do have concerns about the application as it exists at the moment in relation to that, but we'll get that third development application in due course. In relation to the commercial buildings, I can understand why Advanced Housing are wanting to have those new windows in place, and I do note the comments made with conditions that's been put on, or proposed condition to take them out. I think along Frederick Street, putting the existing horizontal windows in a slightly higher elevation compared to where they are at the moment would be an acceptable solution. But along Spencer Street, I think there probably does need to be that passive surveillance and natural light coming in. The proponent's architect did say in relation to putting the skylights in the roof that could be problematic. So I think having some windows along Spencer Street would be advantageous, and basically would propose to move an amendment on condition 13 that reword it, saying the proposed new windows marked in red on the attached approved plans on the Frederick Street frontage are not approved as part of this approval. And then the rest of the wording stay the same. So effectively having approving the 6 vertical windows on Spencer Street.
Okay, you're moving that as an amending motion?
Yes, Presiding Member.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Mayor Stokes? Mayor, do you wish to speak to the item as well?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Mr. Simon?
I don't particularly, well, I'm more in favour of removing condition 13 entirely. I think so I'll certainly vote for this aspect of it, but I'll still move to the entire condition be removed, because I think the elevations cannot be seen in isolation one to the other. In fact, what you see when you see a building like this is you see, particularly in this location, most of the time you will be seeing 2 elevations, not just one. And I think that the 2 match together. I think the architects have done a perfectly good job of doing that. I think it's an adaptive reuse for any heritage building such as this. Then some degree of sensitive flexibility is commonplace. And certainly I agree with the sentiment of this condition modification, but I'll be further moving that the whole condition be deleted.
Okay, Lindsay, you wish to speak to the motion as put?
The motion as worded?
Yes.
No, thank you.
I tend to agree with Mr. Simon. I think the totality of the building is submitted with the windows, I think are appropriate, and I'll be moving for supporting the deletion of condition 13. That being the case, can I Councillor Terry, you wish to?
Yes, presiding member, so I'm prepared to amend the amendment or to withdraw that amendment and go with removing condition 13 in totality.
Okay, so procedurally you can
Withdraw
withdraw it and the seconder agrees?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so councillor Terry, do you wish to move another amendment to delete condition 13?
Yes, I do, presiding member, yeah.
And do I have a seconder for that? John Syme. Councillor Terry, do you wish to discuss it any further?
I don't think I really need to add too much. When I did read it, I was a little bit concerned why the need to take those windows out. I haven't heard enough from staff to justify taking those windows out in totality. So I think it's a good change that the proponents have made in relation to those windows and having that passive surveillance and the natural light coming into the windows into the building, especially along Spencer Street. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Syme, do you wish to?
Oh, look, I've said pretty much everything I need to say. I think the proposal as designed by these architects are a very good example of adaptive reuse of a heritage building. I don't think any heritage values are harmed in any way by this approach, and so I think we should accept it and let them get on with the job.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? If not, I'll put the amendment to delete condition 13 from the recommendation. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Getting back to the standard motion. There's Dr. You've spoken, Lindsay has spoken, Councillor Terry has spoken, and John, do you wish to speak to?
Look, very briefly now. Look, first of all, I commend Advanced Housing for excluding Norman House and its grounds from this. When I saw this the first time, clearly Norman House and everything around it was driving all the concerns, and I think it's very wise to have compacted this down to what this current proposal is. I think as it's turned out, it's now a very good one. It's an important set of accommodation generally for Albany. I think it's needed. And so I commend this project now highly. And I think, as I say, I also commend the wisdom of Advanced Housing and taking Norman House off. That was always going to be almost an insoluble problem, I think.
Okay, well, I too am supportive of the proposal as submitted. I think it's a tremendous use of an underutilised site on the periphery of the CBD. It introduces a residential component. It also adapts and utilises underutilised existing commercial dwellings, and in activating this area of the city with sort of 24-hour usage, I think it's a very good project. That being the case, I will invite Mayor Stokes to close debate on the item.
No, I think we look like we're pretty well agreed. This is a fantastic, important for Albany, and the objectives of social and affordable housing and city infill are being met, and with consideration for within all the guidelines. So well done.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'll put the motion as amended with the deletion of item condition 13 and the wording from the R13 direction. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Three on the agenda, and D, item 4, Form 2 DAP applications around 5, no SAT reconsiderations on the agenda. Part D, SAT applications and Supreme Court appeals are all noted if anyone wishes to get a copy of those. And item 2, general business. There being none, I'll close the meeting at 10:32 a.m. and thank City of Albany councillors, staff and proponents for their participation, as I will with other panel members and Secretariat staff. Thank you very much.